When you're a homeless person, you are putting yourself at enormous risk.
You stuck yourself in the middle of a murder investigation.
I never killed anybody.
You have no protection and no warning. You're an easy target.
You're full of shit. I'm telling you that you're lying to me, and I'm calling you on it.
There is a predator in our midst who enjoys the sport of killing.
It's kind of like a shark circling. As a cop, like, I get chills thinking about it.
The biggest fear we have is more people are going to end up dead.
I spent my career closing murder cases. But I'm not the only one who answered the call. It takes a rare breed to solve the unsolvable, to catch a ruthless killer, to find justice for the dead. That's what it takes to be an American detective.
I'm Detective Dan Long with the Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department, Homicide Section. I love investigations. I really like doing interviews and interrogations. I believe that's my forte. But it's all of it. You get to take a case from the very beginning, and you do not surrender that case, ever. It was just after midnight, and I was home in bed asleep. I get the phone call from my sergeant, and he says, "We're rolling."
They arrive at Ogden Avenue and City Parkway on the report of a discovered body.
Ogden runs right through the center of Las Vegas downtown. It's actually Union Pacific Railroad property.
This is a part of the town that is, after 5, very quiet.
The victim was found by a Union Pacific policeman clearing the area around the tracks. Detectives are briefed that it's a male victim.
He was covered with a sheet. And he was bleeding profusely from his head.
His left eye is swollen shut, and his skull has been crushed. Someone has struck him with a blunt instrument, which could be anything. Somebody is swinging for the right field wall in Yankee Stadium.
It was pretty clear this victim was one of our less fortunate citizens who happened to be homeless.
Multiple layers of clothing, multiple jackets. It is January, and even though it's the desert, it goes down to 30 degrees at night quite commonly.
When the coroner investigator got there, we found that he had a wallet.
He's 46 years old, and his name is Daniel Aldape. Okay, a major step forward.
We found he had $234 in cash, besides a whole bunch of change on him.
That's important as to motive. It isn't robbery. They didn't take the money. Looking at the scene itself and looking at the body and its position, supine, no disturbance in the dirt, no evidence of a struggle, and forensic testing failed despite the effort.
It's an ambush attack. He was killed so quickly that he had no defensive wounds.
The obvious motive here is to kill, not to injure them, to kill them.
I can't think of a more dangerous way to live than being homeless and on the streets.
The dangers of sleeping outdoors is anything you can imagine. You're vulnerable. You're out in the open.
You're an easy target. You have no protection and no warning.
We started expanding the area of investigation. The captain of Downtown Area Command, Andy Walsh, becomes involved.
My responsibilities, I manage the crime and our day-to-day operations. We had great detectives, but Dan was kind of a personal favorite for me. He was good at what he did. Just looking at the lay of the land, kind of an isolated area.
But this is a major city. There are probably cameras everywhere. The exception being, there aren't any. They happen to be in a dead zone.
So we don't have any witnesses. We don't have any video.
This particular crime scene has left many unanswered questions. Detectives go to the autopsy to determine any other facts that can be learned. The coroner's opinion is this individual was struck with a very heavy, blunt instrument.
The object that was used had a linear edge to it. It appeared to be a hammer.
Further, the coroner points out there are hinge fractures, which are extremely rare. A hinge fracture is a portion of the skull that breaks the opposite direction of force, like the hinge on a door.
His head was resting on cement when somebody used a hammer with excessive force, at least 4 times, to crush his skull.
A very brutal death, but in the coroner's opinion, instantaneous.
The coroner did rule it a homicide. Also, Daniel had a contusion to his eye that was old.
You know, right away you start thinking, okay, we might have a lead here.
We thought maybe he'd been in a fist fight and he'd gotten punched.
So let's beat the bushes to see who knows him. And more importantly, perhaps we can learn who hates him. They track down his sister. They need to notify her of the death, of course, but they're also hopeful that she can provide background information.
Danny was 4 years older than I was. We grew up just outside of Chicago. He was like a true Chicago sports fanatic. He was a kind soul, truthfully, and really just loved his family and loved music. Music was his entire being. He loved obscure heavy metal music that no one's ever heard of, and he became a DJ.
And he's known as Metal Dan. That was his dream work. He finally achieves it. Things are going along swimmingly for several years. But then he develops mental health issues.
We started seeing small changes in his personality. He would come home from work and he would have a story that just didn't quite make sense. You know, he thought that potentially people were following him or people were trying to intentionally do things to him. It was hard for all of us to deal with because obviously he's our family and we want him to feel safe. And he didn't feel safe. And it was very, very sad. Sorry. Thank you.
He was self-medicating with alcohol. When he was drinking hard alcohol, he could become aggressive, and he had been in fights.
It's so hard to think about what he was dealing with in his head and what he was feeling. What happened to us was terrible, but what happened to him was catastrophic.
And he winds up losing his job, losing his identity, losing everything.
My mom said you have to either get on some sort of medicine or you have to leave, and he chose to leave. He was staying in a homeless shelter at that point. Eventually, he came up with a plan. I want to try to go someplace warmer, a little bit nicer, like a getaway from the winters.
The expression in the homeless world is to follow the sun. It's the only way they've got to stay warm.
He said, I'm gonna try Vegas. He'll panhandle and be able to make a ton of money. He's a nice, likable guy, but unfortunately, he didn't make it in Vegas very long.
So she provides interesting information, but that's all she truly knows.
Once you get past the victimology and you don't have any suspects, it's very hard to have any leads.
These are the kinds of crimes that go unsolved.
We had the original thought that he was possibly attacked by another homeless person.
So my partner and I decided we're just going to have to talk to people in the homeless communities to find anybody that knew Daniel, and if he had had a problem with anybody.
It is a daunting task. The city of Las Vegas has a population of about 6,000 homeless people. That's a lot of people. This is not going to be easy.
Captain Walsh gave us some officers, talked to every single homeless person in that area, which is impossible.
I had the air unit, the helicopter, fly around the area and look for homeless camps that you can't see from the street.
There's a specific tip line that's going to be established.
You are getting a lot of probably highly irrelevant information, but you're looking for sort of that needle in the haystack.
And then there was a glimmer of hope.
A tip comes in that there's a guy on the street whose name is Ron Smith. And he always wears a white cowboy hat.
He was known as Cowboy. Daniel had stated that this homeless guy, the cowboy, is crazy.
Now, there you go. Did you threaten Mr. Aldape and he didn't respond appropriately? So you decided to bash his head in with a hammer. Well, let's go find out. Detectives finally have a specific suspect. Mr. Ron Smith. They go to those places where he's known to hang out.
It took us several days. But we did find Cowboy.
They ask him about Daniel Aldape, and he's not cooperative. He's confrontive.
He had a lot of anger issues, to the point where he screamed at a street sign for several minutes.
So they change the tone. And they say, well, let me tell you the problem, Chief. Daniel Aldape is dead. Somebody murdered him and beat his brains in. And that might be you, from what we hear.
And it worked somewhat with Cowboy, and he was able to talk to us.
So he goes into a long explanation. I threaten everybody. It's my scheme to protect myself. They all play the bravado game.
He said he had nothing to do with Daniel's death. And he was actually in the shelter at the time that Daniel had been killed. So we didn't believe Cowboy had anything to do with the actual death.
So now the case begins to grow cold. The operative method they've been using is this was a personal attack designed to do in Mr. Aldape. What if it's just an attack by somebody who likes to kill people? Who knows? It's 1 month after the murder of Daniel Aldape, and Steve Thompson is waking up for the morning. He sees his friend David Dunn sleeping nearby. He walks over and says, "Hey, Dave." And nothing. He sees blood, a lot of blood.
I was at work when we got the call.
Detectives are notified there's been another murder. But then they hear the location. Ogden Avenue and City Parkway.
Right away, I was like, oh boy. We have two homeless guys sleeping diagonally across an intersection from each other, murdered about a month apart.
Coincidence? No such thing. And when they arrive, they're briefed that the victim is 60-year-old David Dunn.
We're looking at the victim. And he has multiple blows to the head with what appeared to be a hammer.
It appears as if he was sleeping when he was attacked. His possessions are all around him, including cash.
His clothing and his belongings were not rifled through. This is not a robbery.
It's almost as if it's the same murder with a different body.
So when you look at this intersection here, you can see this is right where Daniel Aldape was when he was sleeping. You could see how close we are to that area there, and that's where Dave Dunn was killed. I mean, for crying out loud, there's no way that these things are not connected. Clear as day, it was the same person that did it.
Police are concerned someone in our valley may be targeting homeless people for murder.
It's been at this same intersection, essentially, that about 1 month apart, two different homeless men were killed in the same manner.
The reasons they're not here is simply because they slept on the ground outside in our community.
We are now looking at somebody that is killing multiple people. They are not robbing these people. So why in this same intersection? It doesn't make sense. These are going to be extremely difficult to solve.
For now, the focus by the detectives is on this individual. David Dunn, what can they learn about any enemies he may have?
We are able to identify his patterns very, very quickly.
He commonly goes to the Reformation Lutheran Church, where they serve a free lunch to homeless people every day. When they arrive at the church, they meet with Pastor Jason Adams.
We heard the story on the news, and it's just so gruesome and awful to imagine that happening to somebody.
Pastor Adams refers to David Dunn as a friendly, pleasant man who's never had an enemy.
Dave was one of the guys who came in every day, right on time, and with a smile on his face, jovial, never starting trouble. Dave would come in at times with a coupon that somebody gave him, and he would want to share it with his friends, even though he didn't have a lot himself. It was really telling about who he was.
The detectives asked Pastor Adams, where does he normally stay? Well, he always sleeps in a shelter, but if he couldn't get a bed that night, then he would be outside. He just happened to be there that night when he was discovered and killed. This suggests that the killer of David Dunn killed him at random.
That sends red flags up that we now have an individual who is hunting homeless people in this particular area of town.
This has all the appearances of a serial killer.
Metro hoping someone saw something. Their big fear is that this person may strike again.
With two murders already having happened, the possibility of a serial killer on the loose increases the pressure to resolve these cases.
The biggest fear we have is more people are going to end up dead.
The information travels through the homeless community like a plague. Whoever this is killing homeless people.
A lot of the individuals, they were scared for themselves to know that they could be next.
They believe that nighttime is the time this killer is active.
So they would just not sleep. Others would ride the bus all night. Others might sneak into a casino and sleep for an hour or two in a restroom.
You cannot stay awake for the rest of your days. You have to sleep. This is an extremely real threat to the homeless people of Las Vegas.
You can expect that there will be another killing at some point.
We were having meetings, and Captain Walsh was like, what are you doing to stop these?
God forbid I have, another victim in the same intersection. I mean, it just really would have been painful to live with that we didn't do something.
There's a lot of discussion. During one of the meetings, Captain Andy Walsh advises us that he is going to try something completely different.
That's when the light bulb went off, really. I remembered that having gone through some CPR training that we had life-size CPR dummies. And so I called a friend of mine over search and rescue. He goes, "What, do you want a CPR class?" I said, "No, I'm going to put one out and dress it up as a homeless person."
And I believe what I said is, "Are you crazy?"
Best case scenario was you had the mannequin getting attacked in the same manner that you envisioned the murders occurring.
Seemed like a Hail Mary.
This is, I mean, you're not going to say very much. You're talking with the captain.
After he got done laughing, he said, "Good luck."
It's the boss's idea, and as usual, boss wins. So they took the pictures of the prior victims and studied their outfits. They matched it as close as they could without being identical with the first two victims.
They really got creative. We named the mannequin Charlie McCarthy.
Charlie McCarthy was a dummy in the 50s and 60s, performed by a ventriloquist on The Sullivan Show.
Perfect name for what we were doing.
Still, I didn't see how this was going to work. But this is a captain. He's thinking way outside the box. And God bless him.
When they get it all done with, he looks pretty good. He could be easily mistaken for a human being, even in the daylight.
But I never really thought, like, what are the legalities of someone hitting the mannequin or the dummy in the head with a hammer? I mean, it was going to generate a suspect for us, right?
You can not charge him with anything for attacking a dummy, but you can identify him, interrogate him, whatever. What's the alternative? He continues to kill, or we try to grab him by the throat. I always vote for grabbing him by the throat.
I reached out to counterterrorism and said, "Hey, I want to put a couple cameras up in this intersection."
Well, first off, that's a lot of money that homicide would never be able to do. But he's a captain. He can rearrange his troops.
And by then, I pretty much knew I had a blank check because I had 2 murders in the same intersection, so nobody really wanted to say no.
You want to help him because you know he's always trying to do the right thing.
They borrow it, and they install it using an undercover technician.
We had the mannequin deployed right here in the same general area. You had the eye in the sky kind of watching. You had the human surveillance up there watching. The trees provided a little concealment. Over here in this area further is where we conceal the cars.
So they have a 2-prong approach. Live policemen and a high-quality camera image of any potential attack on their decoy. So it has a high possibility of success, assuming our shark shows up. Everything is in place. Undercover officers are present, acting as hang-arounds and sleepers, and everyone's on high alert.
I couldn't sleep. I was listening to the radio and monitoring. Anything happening? No movement.
They're so convinced this is going to happen immediately, which it never does. Now it's daylight. Well, how's our dummy going to wake up?
And they did a good job of making sure there was nobody in the area watching, and they would pick Charlie up and put him in the car and drive him back to the station.
So the pattern is established that Charlie McCarthy sleeps there at night, is secretly removed in the early morning light, sits in headquarters and waits to go to work when it gets dark.
We had Charlie on the back patio, smoke cigars of the substation every once in a while with him sitting there with us.
So they started driving Charlie around like he was a member of the team. Being a homicide detective is always a strange job. You'll get frustrated, but you'll never be bored.
We said, we'll give it at least a month and see what happens.
Andy was taking a lot of flack from pretty much all of us.
I think secretly some wanted it to work.
One particular night in the 3rd week, the guys in the police department are watching the cameras. Live action. They see a guy walk by Charlie. He's passing by casually, making certain this guy's asleep.
You could tell from his footsteps and the way he's moving how he's stepping quietly in the rocks. Like, it's real stalking of the victim. It's kind of like a shark circling.
He's carrying a bag. He's working himself up. He can taste the violence. This is our guy. Las Vegas Metro PD see a guy walk by Charlie. He's carrying a bag. Now everyone's on the edge of their seat.
And then the hammer comes out of the bag.
Raises it over his head. And swings it as hard as he can.
As a cop, like, I get chills today just even thinking about it while watching it, because now I know how Daniel Aldape and Dave Dunn died.
In a matter of seconds, he's surrounded.
They get him into custody without any kind of incident and recover the hammer.
They immediately submit it to the crime lab to search it for blood trace or brain tissue.
And I remember thinking, oh my God, I cannot believe this may result in us actually solving this crime.
When we got that phone call in the middle of the night, I might have said a few expletives when they said it to me.
The person is Shane Schindler. He's 30 years old, he has an outstanding jaywalking ticket. Other than that, he has no record. But Charlie caught a shark, and now the detectives are looking at him.
We sit down and we are very, very soft. We want him to tell us as much as he can.
Their objective is to get a statement of some kind, which you can pick apart later.
How long you been here in Vegas?
8 months.
Okay. And you don't have any belongings? You're not staying anywhere?
Nothing, just whatever I got on.
Okay. In the last while, where have you been sleeping?
Just around Las Vegas, parking lots.
I do find out he's from Bay City, Michigan. He does have a phone on him. He had money on him. His belongings are, I wouldn't say clean, but they're cleaner, but he doesn't tell us very much.
You know why you're in handcuffs today?
Something to do with the dummy laying there.
Okay. What happened tonight?
Oh, I was passing through and seeing a dummy laying on the ground, and I don't know, you guys showed up.
So is it normal for you to attack a dummy with a sledgehammer at 3 o'clock in the morning?
Okay. What'd you do with the dummy?
Oh, hey, kicked it or something, but that was it.
Did you ever hit it with a hammer?
No.
Never hit it with a hammer?
No, I did not.
Okay, because I'm going to tell you that you did.
Okay.
Reading Shane is difficult. If you caught him in an out-and-out lie, he just rolled away from it.
I'll be right back.
At this point, they're still forensically testing the hammer for any blood of the victims.
They assume this is the third time he's used it. So they examine it very carefully, chemical trace, so on and so on. Nothing. Clean as a pin. It's not the same hammer.
Where did the hammer come from?
Oh, geez, one of the people on the street, I think I bought it off somebody. I really don't know where.
Okay, you didn't buy it in the store?
No.
It looks brand new.
Nah, it was off somebody.
When you're interrogating someone and you see in his face he's calming down a little bit, you seem to have lost the rattle effect. So you change tactics.
Okay. You stuck yourself in the middle of a murder investigation. That's what we do for a living.
We're investigating 2 men that died by getting struck in the head.
Well,
The look of rattled is back. Good. We're in the right area now.
I never killed anybody.
What kind of feeling does it give you?
Don't give me any feeling. I was a dummy. I hit the dummy in the head.
Today,
Well, yeah.
last month it wasn't a dummy.
Well, I didn't do it, nothing.
The month before it wasn't a dummy.
Well, it wasn't me, so...
First he said he didn't hit the dummy. Now he says he did. So what does that mean? Were you lying then? Are you lying now? Or maybe you're just a liar.
And why would you want to destroy the dummy?
That was kind of funny. Dummy sitting there,
Or did you think it was a person?
No, I thought it was a dummy. I know a real person from a dummy,
Wrapped up in a sleeping bag, it's hard to tell.
Well, the top of his head was sticking out, so...
Well, his head was covered, actually.
When he's making admissions, well, I knew it was a mannequin. No, you didn't.
You're full of shit. I'm telling you that you're lying to me, and I'm calling you on it. Let's move past that. I'm calling you on it. You're lying about it.
Calling me on what?
You hit that dummy in the head with a hammer with an intent to kill it. You did not know that it was a dummy
Yes, I did.
until the blankets moved when you were hitting it.
No, I knew it was a dummy beforehand.
I don't believe you.
Okay, well, everyone's entitled to an opinion.
Schindler tells a completely unbelievable story.
Thank you.
We tried numerous different techniques, and we never got anywhere.
We certainly didn't get a confession, but everything pointed towards this was the guy. I needed to charge him with the 2 murders.
Being out and about in the dark with her sledgehammer and hitting dummies is not criminal. All they have on him to hold him is an unpaid jaywalking ticket.
We actually discussed arresting him, but I said we have to bring in a surveillance team that is going to follow him to what I'm thinking is going to be a campsite. There is a possibility that he might have hidden 2 murder weapons if we could find the blood of either victim. Well, that'd be excellent.
We have to think outside the box, and sometimes you have to create the box. So they've got to do the unthinkable. They got to let him go.
There were some people that looked at me like I had 3 heads, because we probably have a murderer that I'm going to put back on the streets.
They know they have to keep a very tight watch on him, because he could disappear forever. There's nowhere to go legally with Shane Schindler, so they have no option but to release him.
So we had surveillance set up. We weren't going to lose sight of him is really what it boiled down to.
You just keep going until you find something. I'm not going to quit.
Schindler gets on a bus and rides the bus some 20 miles outside of Las Vegas. He gets off that bus,
and he goes into a 1-room apartment.
Well, Schindler, you lying little bastard, you have an apartment. They prepare an affidavit for a search warrant.
He looks at us. He doesn't argue it, nothing.
The place is a pigsty. Half-eaten pizzas, empty cans, filthy clothing, enough to make you throw up.
We're going through it all. We cannot find a hammer, but we do find receipts for a 4-pound engineer hammer and the return of the hammer and another purchase of another hammer.
The hammers were purchased in and around the time frame of the previous murders.
We figure what he's doing is he'll commit a murder with a hammer, clean it, return it to the hardware store, turn it in, get another hammer.
So they immediately go to the hardware store with the receipts.
Nobody recognized the picture of Shane Schindler, but they had a display rack for the hammers. There's 4 of them there, but we learned that they had sold 9. We had a crime scene analyst with us. They did some testing, and we had none on the shelf that had blood. So it was probably sold to another customer.
And whoever bought those hammers might be in possession of somebody's blood and brain matter and not even know it.
So the detectives knew they were on the right track, but now you got to figure out how do you charge them with the 2 murders.
There is no sufficient evidence to support he's killed anybody. Circumstantial evidence, yes. Proof beyond a reasonable doubt? Nope.
We do have conversations with the district attorney, Mark DiGiacomo. I decided to go right to the top and pick the smart guy because I was in serious trouble here.
Prosecutors will find a way.
When they called me and said, look, there's not enough here to book him on the murders, I said, okay, well, what did he do? Well, he took a hammer and hit a mannequin. But that's not what he thought he did. He thought he took a hammer to a human being. Why don't you book him on attempt murder with use of a deadly weapon?
He explains to me that the intent is there and we're going to go through a grand jury.
You have to make an argument to a judge that any reasonable person would have believed, because of the disguise on the dummy, in the mind's eye of the perpetrator, he is attacking a human being.
Well, I think the response was, are you kidding?
And I was like, well, okay. You obviously know the law better than I do.
It's a stretch, but it could work.
We presented the case to the grand jury that gave a true bill, and we had an indictment.
They negotiate with the district attorney that if he pleads guilty, he will not be charged with the murders of the 2 individuals killed with hammers. He accepts the deal.
He pled guilty to attempt murder and agreed to a sentence of 8 to 20 years in the Nevada Department of Corrections.
This is great news. You don't always get a meal, but let's at least get a sandwich. Something is better than nothing. Something that puts him in a jail.
I spoke to Shane numerous times, and he wouldn't admit ever attacking anybody with a hammer. He does say he had slept in that intersection before, and a white male that beat him up took his belongings.
So it's possible that Mr. Schindler sought revenge for being assaulted at that intersection. So it became his hunting ground.
Shane has a very specific image of himself as being very manly, being tough. And I believe that it was eating at him to the point where he started planning out how to kill this man.
The detectives firmly believe that Shane Schindler purchased a sledgehammer and went to the intersection in question. There he sees Daniel Aldape bundled up and asleep. He looks at him and decides he's the guy that hurt him.
And we believe he then kills Daniel with a hammer, 4 blows to the head.
And then he looks more carefully and realizes it's not him. Oh my, a mistake.
We believe he then makes it home. He exchanges the hammer, gets a new hammer.
They also believe, a month or so later, he wanted to continue the hunt. He went to that intersection. Found David Dunn.
It is a blitzkrieg attack with a hammer to the head. He kills him in the exact same manner.
Careful review. Oh no, that's not him either. About a month later, Shane Schindler has a new hammer. He goes to the same intersection, sees a person bundled up and sleeping, and attacks it, and discovers it's not a person at all, it's a dummy. But he hits it in the head with the sledgehammer. That's the crime he pleads guilty to.
Which suggested to me he knew that he was the killer of Mr. Adalpe and Mr. Dunn.
We were all able to be in the courtroom. And when they said somebody from his family would like to speak, he looked like as if he was surprised that he had family that was there, that cared. And you thought you could just murder homeless people and nobody would care. That's so far from the truth, you know? So many people cared.
The only sense of comfort I get is knowing that we didn't have a third victim, but that's all you can do is try to reconcile it.
The telling thing about this is that when Shane went into jail, the killings stopped.
Homeless people or panhandling people or going through things in life that we can't begin to understand. How do you turn this terrible thing that happened into something more positive? I own a t-shirt shop, so I did the Homeless Lives Matter and a hashtag honoring Danny, because, I mean, in all honesty, that's what it was all about. Danny.
This case certainly informs the public the plight that homeless people face every day. They're sleeping in the jungle. They're fully exposed to the dangers the world presents. On the next American Detective.
Robert Wiles disappeared in April of 2008. The Wiles family received a ransom demand a few days after Robert disappeared.
In homicide, the victim is already deceased. In a kidnapping, the victim is still alive. Your mission is to keep that from changing.
When an endearing elderly couple is found brutally murdered, even a veteran police force is left rattled by the crime. I was in shock. I walked out of the bedroom, not able to speak, not able to get on the radio for help. I just stood there. I've been in homicide 21 years. This was one of the worst I've seen. They were hog-tied with duct tape. Their head and mouth were duct taped. When their American dream turned into a nightmare, they looked to their beliefs for a way out. They never really got out of the hole that they were in. The couple were firm believers in an old-style mysticism from their homeland, and they thought there were actually people out there that could lift curses when they needed good. Fortune. That's what she advertised, that she could take bad curses off. Could their spiritual savior be responsible for such an unspeakable crime? They just continue to pour their money into the rituals. They owe somewhere between $250,000 and $280,000. And then she told my uncle, if they don't pay up, I want them dead. None of this would have happened if she wouldn't have been so selfish and greedy. Was she under the impression that you were going to kill the couple? She would. June 10th, 2012, Arlington, Texas. At 7:29 a.m., emergency dispatchers receive a call from 38-year-old Vietnamese immigrant Chow Tran asking for a welfare check on his elderly in-laws. Can you give me their names? My dad's name is Long. Last name Wndyn. He is 70-something right now. Okay. Oh my God. You know what? Him, my son, and my wife, they said they're looking there. They say that they saw everything fall down. Okay, I'll go to our officers now. Worried, Chow sent his teenage son to go knock on the door, which he did, but there was no answer. And the family began to gather, and they became increasingly worried. Chow's family thought that something was wrong. They noticed that the window at their residence was open. Things just didn't look right. Too terrified to go in the house and check on their own family members. They wait outside for police to arrive. I very quickly got dispatched. And when I got there, right away I knew it didn't look like your typical welfare check. This appeared to be an entire family that was standing outside an apartment. And that seemed a little off at first. Also, it being that early in the morning, we don't normally get welfare checks that early. Upon entering the residence, there are all the telltale signs of a burglary. The responding officers noted that the apartment appeared to be in disarray. I'm calling out. There's no answer. I know there's no one in the living room, the kitchen, or the bathroom. The only room that I haven't checked is the bedroom. After a quick check of the bedroom, Officer Weller doesn't see anyone and is convinced the home is empty. When I got there, I wasn't focused on the state of the room. I did not notice anything that stuck out to me. I was solely focused at that point finding the family, making sure everybody was okay. So I'm thinking, great, everybody's fine. Everybody's healthy. They went out for a walk. Still with my flashlight in hand, I go to turn around to leave the bedroom. And at that time, I see hand smudges on the wall next to a very small closet. So I hesitated for a moment. Everything inside of me told me not to open that door. But I would not be doing my job if I did not check that closet. I opened that closet door. I saw two people inside that closet. I knew it was the mom and the dad that I was looking for. They were hogtied with duct tape. Their head and mouth were duct taped. There was blood everywhere. In that split second, I knew they were dead. With my 14 years of experience, this is definitely the most gruesome, brutal scene I have ever seen. I was in shock. I walked out of the bedroom to the living room, and I stood in the middle of the living room. Finally, I was able to get on my radio, and I requested a supervisor and a crime scene unit. When Arlington homicide investigators arrive, they too are stunned by the heinous crime. It appeared that the couple had been beaten with some kind of blunt force object. It was a very violent and bloody scene. They were grabbing walls as they were being taken to the back room. There's evidence thrown about furniture in the living room too as well, ransacking of compact discs. What crossed my initial mind was a robbery gone bad. But even for a robbery, the crime is exceedingly violent. I've been in homicide 21 years. This was one of the worst I've seen. Due to the nature of how the victims were found, I can see blunt force trauma to the forehead. I can see markings that look to be possible hammer, but I wasn't sure. And the amount of duct tape that was used on the victim's face all the way up to their forehead. The crime in and of itself is a heinous, horrific crime. Who would do this? You have to say to yourself, who would be so cold that they would, brutally murder an elderly couple? They're a very nice couple. They never bothered nobody. Everybody loved them. I don't think they have any enemies. When Long Nguyen and Hong Lee immigrated to the United States from Vietnam in 2000, they brought with them their time-honored traditions and their beloved family. They decided to pick up their stakes and move to Arlington, Texas, with their 3 children to pursue the American dream. They were a prominent Asian family. They had lots of ties to the community. Arlington is one of those big cities in Tarrant County that you really do have a good mixture of different cultures. You've got a large Vietnamese community there. The first wave of the immigrant came after 1975, after the fall of Saigon. Some of them adapt to society very well. The parents try to carry their heritage from Vietnam to America. This area, during the 80s and the late 90s, there's a lot of Vietnamese people decide to live there. They study the area very well. That's why they choose Arlington to be a good place for them to do business and create a family. Long and Hong saw an opportunity to create a legacy for their 3 children and grandchildren. When Long and Wong arrived to Texas, they started a commercial sewing business, and they enlisted the help of their son-in-law, Chow, to help run it. Chow was the one who spoke the best English. So he was kind of the face of the business, and he dealt with a lot of the contractors and a lot of the different people. After nearly a decade of rebuilding their lives in the U.S., their American dream came true when they secured a lucrative contract to make garments for A, commercial giant. They actually had contracts with places like Disney. But by 2011, the family's good fortune had all but run out. They had lost the contract with Disney, and the business started going down. The family believed that the string of bad luck required a traditional Vietnamese solution. For a couple thousand years, the Asian people believed the lucky god and the money protection god. If you pray to them, you will have more customers. Most of the time, they invite the spiritual advisor. Spiritual advisor only meet them when their family has something major issue like going to divorce, might be going to bankruptcy, or might be getting trouble with the law. They need protection and healing. The couple were firm believers in an old-style spiritualism, mysticism, from their homeland. And they thought there were actually people out there that could lift those curses when they needed. Good fortune, searching through a local Vietnamese newspaper, Chow Tran and his mother-in-law found an ad for a spiritual advisor 250 miles away in Houston. She advertised that she could take bad curses off, she could put curses on, she could do all of that. They believe that she is the right one to protect them or help them to recover from a bad. Business. Encouraged by his mother-in-law, Hong Lee, Chow contacted the spiritual advisor and asked for her help. She agreed to meet Chow at her Houston home for a consultation. She performed a ritual, and they were incredibly hopeful that she could turn the business around. And they thought that things were going to be looking up. But 1 year later, instead of conjuring good luck, a dark tragedy has befallen the family. On June 10th, Arlington police had just found Long and Hong murdered in their apartment. It appeared that an attack happened as soon as they walked into their apartment. Something did happen at the front door because there was blood there. There was blood on the carpet. There was blood on the couch. There was blood on the table. There was blood on the walls. There was blood everywhere. While Arlington homicide detectives see evidence of a burglary gone wrong, there are other clues as to who might have committed the brutal attack. There was a plate of crushed prescription pills on the coffee table, as if to snort. There was a marijuana cigarette. But to detectives, it's a blue bandana wrapped around a beer bottle that seems almost like a calling card. Arlington did have some very active Vietnamese gangs. They were known to extort money. This was a light blue bandana. So I had to consult with the gang unit to see if they had some knowledge of it. And they did have some knowledge of the color of the bandana. I had everything to believe that it was gang activity. Coming up, detectives believe the evidence is too good to be true. Most gang members, they don't do violent crime. Sometimes things seem too perfect. It was just not a robbery gone bad. We theorized that it was staged. Could a financial windfall point closer to home? I did question who were the beneficiaries. One was Chow Tran himself. On June 10, 2012, in Arlington, Texas, police discover husband and wife Long Nguyen and Hong Lu brutally murdered in their bedroom closet. After finding evidence of gang activity left at the scene, detectives remained skeptical given the severity of the crime. There was a beer bottle with a bandana around it, giving the impression that it was a gang-related incident, that they were leaving their colors to kind of take responsibility for it. It was too perfect of a crime scene. It was too set up to the point where I had everything to believe that it was gang activity. So we theorized that it was staged. Other initial items that we found that we thought we can send off to get immediate tests were taken, such as the marijuana cigarettes for DNA purposes. They took hair fibers, DNA. They took swabs of the blood to see if there were any dual samples. They processed the duct tape to see if there's fingerprints or evidence. Investigators next speak with the family to try and learn more about the victims, clearly rattled by the discovery of their loved ones. There's only one family member able to speak with detectives, 38-year-old Chow Tran. I initially interviewed Chow Tran, who's the son-in-law. Chow being a primary spokesperson for the family because he speaks English. Chow informed Detective Stewart that the night of this offense, they were all at a birthday party, and they were celebrating his father-in-law's birthday. According to Chow, his in-laws seemed to have a good time and stayed until 10:30. They received a ride home from another family member, and that was the last time they were seen alive. I asked, did they have a lot of money around the house and things of that nature? Vietnamese tend to carry money at home. They don't trust the American banks. Chow says that if they did have money at home, it wasn't much. Chow said the sewing business was never great. It was never thriving, and they thought that perhaps it was cursed. Despite their financial stress, Chow has no idea how that could have led to their horrific deaths. I asked him every possible question as far as possible enemies. Enemies as far as the business is concerned, family members, anybody who would want to harm this couple. No one could think of any reason to want this couple dead. They were sweet and they were generous, and they were hardworking, and they had great ties to the community. On June 11th, 2012, detectives attend the couple's autopsy at the Tarrant County Medical Examiner's office. It appeared that there was a blunt force trauma to the victim's head, struck with some sort of object. At the time, don't know what type of object that was, because nothing was found there at the crime scene. But that's not what killed him. Her face had been wrapped in 25 feet of duct tape. His face had been wrapped in 10 feet of duct tape, and they suffocated. The cause of death is unsettling, even for the seasoned homicide investigators. Just the amount of pain that it took to die in that fashion, that, to me, is like holding your breath until you die. So that I've always thought just how painful it was for both victims, though detectives aren't convinced the incident is gang-related. They can't rule out the possibility, and are hopeful the partial forensic evidence they collected leads to a suspect. If you look at the extensiveness of the duct tape and how it was applied, and to what extent it was applied, one would have to believe that the intent was to kill them. It was just not a robbery gone bad. The whole point was to kill the victims. Gang activity could have been a theory. It just seems very personal to both victims. As detectives conclude their briefing with the coroner, they receive a phone call that instantly captures their attention. Detective Stewart got a call from the insurance company after the victim's death, and routinely, the insurance companies will call when there is a policy over a certain amount, and their insurance policy was at least $1 million. I did question the insurance company as far as who were the beneficiaries. One was Chow Tran himself. On June 13th, 2012, detectives meet with Chow at the Arlington Police Station and ask him about his in-law's business and sizable insurance policy. He told me that because the business was in their name, they wanted to make sure that they had the ability to carry on the business if one of the family members were to pass away. When it comes to their whereabouts the night of the murders, Chow and the rest of his family have airtight alibis. No. They come directly to my house from 4.30 around to 5. We eat, and when we sit together, we play cards until 10 o'clock. 10 over 10 o'clock, you know? So they stayed there until about 10? 10 over 10. He cooperated with answering all questions I had, as far as timelines of where they were at the time, the party, who was there. So I didn't have anything definitive to say that he was a suspect at the time. Police collect DNA and fingerprint samples from Chow and the other family members and compare it to the evidence found at the scene. We were able to gather a DNA profile from the marijuana cigarettes. They were hopeful that that would be the link, that would be the linchpin to the killer, that would lead them to whoever committed these heinous crimes. But when the results come back, neither the DNA nor prints match any of Long and Hong's family members or any of the other profiles, save in the FBI's combined DNA index system. So it was very disappointing when we got the DNA sample back, and they were not in Cody's. So then it could be an adult who just never committed crime before, and therefore not in Cody's as. Well, there's another possibility. As Cody's does not account for a certain age group of criminal offenders, minors. One of the suspicions from the homicide detective was that it was a juvenile whose DNA is not in the system yet. Without a DNA match, police are left to search for any possible lead, but none materialize. After interviewing and swabbing probably 50 to 60 people, family members, a lot of neighbors, we still did not get any results as far as a possible lead on a suspect at that time. They left no stone unturned, but for at least 2 years, there was no leads on this case, and the case turns cold. There was no movement on it whatsoever, and then in 2015 it sprung back to life. Coming up, a bizarre crime sparks a new lead for detectives. Him stealing that horse started this whole process of us finally realizing who actually killed the victims, and a jailhouse interview revealed some explosive information. The plan was to make it look like thugs or gang members end up committing the crime, but it was an inside job. On October 12, 2015, over 3 years after the unsolved murders of Hong Lee and Long Nguyen, the Arlington Police Department received new information on the cold case. In 2015, police received word that they had a DNA match on the blunt that was recovered from the crime scene. In 2012, Willie Guillory, who stole a horse out of Houston, and of course that's a felony in the state of Texas. It turned out at the time of the actual homicide, this kid was 16 years old, being a minor with no prior felonies. Willie's DNA hadn't been in the Cody system at the time of the murders in 2012. But in 2015, he became both an adult and a felon, which added his name to the DNA database. You have to have a felony conviction in order for your profile to even be put into Cody's. And so him stealing that horse started this whole process. On October 17, 2015, Willie Guillory is brought to the Arlington Police Department for questioning, but not for the murders. He was in violation, not checking in with his parole officer. We in turn made contact with him, and we made arrests based on a violation of his parole and not. The murder at the time, I wasn't there. Are you saying your DNA was there? I don't know if it was or wasn't because I wasn't nowhere around Arlington. I promise you I have room. And you know what? That's why I'm going to check your DNA again, because maybe we made a mistake. If there'll be nothing but DNA, people can take your DNA and do shit while you sleep. When I explained to him the nature of the DNA, how DNA worked, how and why we believe he was inside that apartment, he immediately broke down, started crying. He confessed. He said, yes, I was there. Yes, I did it, but I didn't do it alone. Willie says that in 2012, he was 16 years old and living with his uncle, 49-year-old Bobby Guillory. Bobby said, you're going to go help me do this thing up in Arlington, Texas, and took Willie along. Willie's life was such that he didn't feel like he had much choice. Willie says that on June 9, 2012, he and his uncle made the 3-hour drive to Arlington. He also claims that his uncle had a key to Hong and Long's apartment in order to stage a burglary. This is exactly how it all happened. The plan that my uncle ended up coming up with was throw stuff around, help him set up some evidence to make it look like thugs or gang members ended up committing the crime. We had beer bottles, a blue bandana, pills, marijuana. He actually left a marijuana cigarette or the remains of marijuana cigarette. He smoked a little bit of it. By leaving the marijuana cigarette to stage this, that was the very evidence that linked up to Willie Guillory. Once the couple came home, I ran out, ended up running towards the door, trying to stop the lady from getting out or making any noise. Then my uncle ended up snatching up the man and ended up beating the man. He said, I know he hit him with something similar to some type of blunt bat or something like that was used to incapacitate the victims. Willie then says that after Hong and Long stopped fighting back, he and his uncle used the duct tape to keep them from escaping. He ended up telling me, help me grab him, put him in the back. Once I took him to the back, he ended up duct taping him. He said, help me transfer them from the room to the closet. And that's where we left them, and then we left. With such a stark admission of guilt, detectives asked why Bobby and Willie had targeted the couple. That's when Willie reveals it was a murder for hire plot orchestrated by a friend of his. Uncle's named Daphne Wright. I met Daphne through my Uncle Bobby. My uncle went into her office and started talking to her, and she said that people owed her money and she wanted them to pay up. And then she told my uncle, if they don't pay up, I want them dead. At that point, Willie says, yes, I did this. I was used by Daphne. Daphne was the driving force behind this. She used us all. It was an inside job. Daphne ended up giving the key to Bobby to get in the house. With this new information, investigators charge Willie Guillory with murder, but they also need to verify his version of events. Their next moves are to locate Bobby Guillory and create a profile of Daphne Wright. Now we know that it's not some random gang. It's not some random people. We then start the investigation on Daphne, piecing things together. Police learned Daphne Wright was a spiritual advisor based in Houston, who basically offered to turn businesses around and to bring good fortune to families. People would come, purchase her services, and use her. And apparently she was quite popular and had a lot of business. When detectives reach out to Chow to see if he knows Daphne Wright, they're met with suspicious response. When I do try to talk to Chow, he now directs me to his attorney, whose attorney says that if you need to speak to him, you need to come through me. We believe he has wind that now I'm on a Daphne, and he knows Daphne is a connection to him. Detectives now have multiple leads, but in order to bridge the connection between Chow and Daphne, they need to talk to Willie's uncle, Bobby Guillory. Willie was a catalyst at first. Bobby was the next piece of the puzzle. Coming up, detectives move on Bobby Guillory, but what they find is another pawn in a bigger game. I was scared. I really was. Daphne wanted her money, but was she truly the mastermind? How did Daphne get the keys? From you. Chow Tran? No. On December 16th, 2015, detectives traveled to Katy, Texas, to the address of 52-year-old Bobby Guillory, one of the two men alleged to have participated in the brutal murders of Long Nguyen and Hong Lee. Police arrested Bobby on 2 counts of capital murder, just like his nephew, Willie. While at first Bobby refuses to talk, it's not long before he changes his tune. I went down with a search warrant for his DNA profile. This, probably got him thinking maybe they got something on me. And then he actually confessed to the offense. Didn't really want to hurt no one. When I put that tape, I was scared. I really was. I know what I did. I was so scared, still scared. Bobby did not have a criminal history at all. So before this offense occurred, he's never been in trouble with the law. Like Willie, Bobby also puts the blame solely on 44-year-old Daphne Wright, who Bobby claims orchestrated the hit. So my question to you is, how much money were you promised by Daphne to go down and do this? $10,000. $10,000. Okay. She told you that you would get $10,000? Yes. Bobby says he first met Daphne when he was dating her friend in 2011. At the time, he had been laid off work and was struggling to make ends meet. I was so desperate, so hungry, so didn't want to be on the street, didn't know what to do, didn't know how to do it. Bobby says Daphne knew his financial desperation would make him receptive to her plan. She didn't use us. None of this would have happened if she wouldn't have been so selfish and greedy. Daphne wanted her money. Bobby soon learned that Daphne was something akin to a spiritual loan shark. The people who owed her the most were Hong Lee and Chow Tran, despite the fact that Daphne had never been able to remove the curse on their business. Business didn't really pick up, and they never really got out of the hole that they were in as far as the business was concerned. Instead of changing course, Chow just continued to pour their money into Daphne. She started running these guys on credit, and it ballooned up to somewhere between $250,000 and $280,000. Bobby says that when Daphne called in the bill, Chow and Hong couldn't pay, and that Daphne wasn't the type to forgive a debt. She was wanting to recoup the money that she felt like she was owed. She learned that Chow and his wife were actually the beneficiaries of 2 very substantial life insurance policies. Daphne pounced on the idea, and they could collect on both insurance policies. From Bobby's perspective, Daphne was a mastermind behind this whole entire deal. She dictated everything that was supposed to go down. When Daphne gave you a key to that apartment, you drove to Arlington. Was Daphne under the impression that you were going to kill the couple? She would. But when Bobby tells investigators how Daphne got the key, he makes a startling accusation. Chow Tran. Yeah. She told you that's where she got the key from? From you. Detectives are completely blindsided by the allegations of betrayal. I developed a relationship with Chow and his family. Would go see them periodically through the course of this investigation. And then all of a sudden, Bobby himself is saying that Chow was involved in this. Before following up on Bobby's accusations against Chow, Investigators focus on the woman who allegedly ordered the murders, Daphne Wright. On August 31st, 2016, detectives arrive at her Houston home. She was married and she had 3 daughters. She appeared to be the driving force in the family. She's loud, she's direct. She runs a house. Everything centers around her. Her husband, Howard, was pretty much subservient to her. We tried to talk to her about Chow. She confirms that she knows Chow. He's a client of hers. She knew about the death of the loved ones, the in-laws. She said that he told her about it. I asked her about the amount that Chow had to pay her. She would not go into detail. I asked Daphne, what happens if someone doesn't pay you? And then she looked at me and she says, oh, they will pay. She had no doubt that she would be paid. When detectives confront Daphne with Bobby's story, she admits to knowing Bobby but refuses to go into detail. She was still very short with us and very cold. She wasn't going to help. She wasn't going to help us at all. Willie knew who Daphne was. Bobby, ID'd her. Everything pointed to her. Yeah, she was definitely involved and she needed to be in jail. After Daphne declines to share the extent of her business dealings with Chow, detectives are forced to obtain an arrest warrant and return to Daphne's home. We go to the Houston area and we make that arrest. But we also do a search warrant on her home as well. Inside, police find a ledger which details Daphne's fees for providing her spiritual services, including removing and applying curses. There were ledgers that purported to show that she was charging people $10, $20, $30, $40. 000 for services rendered. I mean, my eyeballs popped out of my head. With Daphne under arrest, detectives first attempt to find out if her husband Howard knows anything about the crime. My husband was very cooperative. He maintained that he didn't know any of this was happening. I didn't know why we were there. Maintained his wife's innocence. Do you have any idea or anything that I'm talking about right now reference this whole situation? Absolutely not. This is your first time hearing any of this information at all? This is the very first time. Detectives move on to Daphne, hoping the gravity of her arrest will encourage her to confess. But Daphne continues to hold her ground. If I have to make any statements or anything, I like to have my lawyer present before I do anything. Okay, coming up, Chow reveals how much control Daphne had over their family. He tried to say it was that Daphne was controlling his mind, that Daphne had control over his mind and his body, and she was making him do things. But can he be trusted? He claimed that his mother-in-law wanted to be killed. It was completely ludicrous. To fully explain our case against Daphne, you have to sometimes make a statement and make a deal with the devil. In 2015, detectives subpoenaed Chow Tran's financial records. They discovered that since the deaths of his in-laws, Long Nguyen and Hong Lee, he had been busy, but not with the family business. We found a new home was purchased. We also know that the business folded. They didn't open the business again. I want to interview him now, but he refuses to talk to me, although authorities believe Chow is involved in the murder plot. Daphne Wright seems to be the puppet master. Prosecutors are willing to offer Chow a deal in order to secure their case against the others. With his lawyer present, Chow explains that when the family's sewing business started to struggle, he and his mother-in-law, Hong Lee, reached out to Daphne. According to Chow, they were terrified of being in debt to someone they believed had spiritual powers. If they believe in her ability to remove a curse, they know that she can also put a curse on them as well. She made it very clear. If someone didn't pay, what would happen? And she basically said, I'm getting my money one way or another. Chow claims that to save her family from an even more terrible curse at Daphne's hands, Hong was prepared to offer herself as the ultimate sacrifice. Chow said she had actually suggested that she sacrifice herself, that they let her die so that they could collect the insurance policy and pay Daphne. Daphne thought it was a great idea. In fact, one life insurance policy wasn't enough for Daphne. She wanted both of them dead so that they could collect on both insurance policies and cover their full debt Investigators believe that after Chow and his wife received the insurance money, he paid Daphne in cash. But they have serious doubts about Chow's claim that this was Hong's idea. He claimed his mother-in-law wanted to be killed. It was completely ludicrous. Still, prosecutors believe they need Chow to put Daphne, the woman who hired and paid the hitmen, behind bars. And they make him an offer he can't refuse. After all is said and done, Chow is offered immunity in exchange for his testimony against Bobby. Willie and Daphne. We knew we would need Chow in order to strengthen our case against Daphne. So, you have to sometimes make a deal with the devil. On August 26, 2019, Daphne's trial begins and Chow's testimony is undeniably impactful. Chow portrayed Daphne as a greedy woman who would do anything to get her money, even if it meant killing two elderly, sweet people. Daphne's defense attacks Chow's credibility and the claim that the family was indebted to a mystical mafiosa. What Chow testified was they owed Daphne a lot of money, and that Daphne was basically blackmailing them. He tried to say was that Daphne was controlling his mind, that Daphne had control over his mind and his body, and she was making him do things. You run up a $280,000 bill, and there's not a single documentation of it anywhere. I continue to say, provide me with an email. How you owe money? Zero, nothing. I believe Chow Tran wanted the $850,000. The $850,000 went in his pocket, nowhere else. Chow also testifies he left the key to the apartment under a mat and told Daphne, who in turn told Bobby Guillory. The defense said even though Chow received immunity, he was complicit in this scheme. In September 2019, the jury returns to announce Daphne's fate. Unfortunately, the jury made a call that I simply disagree with. She was convicted of capital murder. She received the ultimate punishment, which is life in prison without parole. My intention was to try Chow Tran, and as it stands right now, Chow is not charged, and unless Daphne sits in jail long enough or Bobby sits in jail long enough to bring us some independent evidence, he's not going to get charged. It will never sit well for me that Chow Tran is not in prison. I do believe that what goes around comes around. What's done in the dark will come to light, and I thoroughly believe that, and they'll have to answer for what they did, all of them. She was being followed. When she was found dead, the scene raised immediate red flags. A safety gate at the bottom of the stairs was displaced, and back door was unlocked. And the autopsy? It was performed by a medical examiner who was later accused of serious professional misconduct. The cause and manner of death were ruled undetermined. There were conflicting notes about a heart attack that left no actual physical damage on her heart. There were prescription pills found at the scene, yet her toxicology report showed absolutely nothing. It is a textbook case of an investigation that fell apart before it even started. For 13 years, her family has lived in the quiet agony of an inactive file. The system failed Laura, and the truth remains locked behind administrative closed doors. Now, let's travel far away from the desert to a rainy, overcast afternoon in Racine County, Wisconsin. The date was July 9, 1969. A local family was walking near an old condemned steel trestle bridge on 8 Mile Road by the Root River. They saw what looked like a pile of debris, but it was not debris. It was the remains of 18-year-old Stephanie Casper. She was on the verge of her 18th birthday. A kind girl who worked part-time at Mark's Big Boy restaurant in Milwaukee. Her body had been dismembered post-mortem with methodical, near-surgical precision. Parts of her were wrapped in pages of the Milwaukee Sentinel dated June 24th. Her father, Charles Casper, had to identify his own daughter. I tell you, that is a phone call no parent should ever have to receive. Stephanie had a secret. She was dating a 22-year-old serviceman named John. In 1969, she felt she had to hide this relationship from her parents. On the night she vanished, she walked out of the restaurant at 12:30 in the morning, carrying her brown leather purse. John was supposed to pick her up, but he fell asleep. A simple, Human mistake that opened the door for a predator. Weeks later, personal items like a gold clutch and an appointment book were found discarded in Franklin, suggesting the killer was moving between Milwaukee and Racine, using the quiet back roads they knew well. Over the decades, this case became a graveyard of leads. They looked at a restaurant manager who acted too eager. They looked at a cook named Michael Bartelt who gave inconsistent stories. They looked at his brother. They looked at a monster named Wilbert Mackey, a man who terrorized his own family. But the DNA technology of the time was not ready, and the evidence recovered from a towel and a military jacket was too degraded. Lieutenant Brian Van Sack has kept this investigation alive, refusing to let Stephanie's memory fade into a dusty drawer. 57 years is a long time to wait for justice, but the search for the truth does not have an expiration date. Finally, we go to the high, rugged country of Taos, New Mexico. June 26, 2025. 18-year-old Sierra Casillas is working her shift at a coffee shop when her father, Mark, calls. He is panicking. Her mother, Melissa, did not show up for her shift as an administrative assistant at the Los Alamos National Laboratory. They commuted together every single day, but that morning, Melissa had returned home alone to get her forgotten security badge. Sierra saw her mother shortly before 1 o'clock when Melissa dropped off lunch for her. After that, nothing. No text went through. The location sharing app went dead. Sierra went home. The family Jetta was in the driveway. The dogs were outside, quiet and subdued. Inside the house, Melissa's keys, her security badge, her work phone, and a sentimental gold chain she wore every day were sitting on the kitchen table. Her paycheck was untouched in the loft. But in the office, Sierra made a discovery that sends a chill down your spine. 2 personal cell phones were sitting there. Both had been completely restored to their factory settings. Their histories were wiped clean, and the cloud security credentials had been changed. The heart of that home had vanished into thin air, and someone had systematically erased her digital existence. The investigation led by State Police Agent Ezekiel Esquivel Mata revealed a family split in 2. Mark Casillas, the husband, claimed Melissa ran away to escape the crushing weight of financial debt, garnished wages, and a suspended security clearance. He painted a picture of a woman who just chose to walk away. But Melissa's own family, the Mondragons, rejected that story completely. They said she would never, under any circumstances, abandon her daughter. A tip came in from a neighbor who saw a woman matching Melissa's description struggling near highway 518 with a mysterious blue Dodge truck nearby. Mark quickly dismissed the tip, pointing out discrepancies in the clothing and the lack of a limp. To some, he was just a husband who knew his wife. To others, it looked like he was steering the police away. Later, surveillance video from July showed a woman with a backpack walking along that same highway. But the question of the phones remains. 2 separate factory resets, hours apart. If a third party did that, why wait hours between resets? If Melissa did it, she was incredibly methodical for someone in a panic. No banking activity, no passport use, nothing. Drones and search dogs found nothing, except for a blood-like stain near a fish tank inside the home. A family is now divided, each side holding on to their own version of the truth, unable to grieve together. I tell you, whether it is a hot desert office, a quiet Wisconsin river, or a house in the high mountains of New Mexico, people think they can make their dark secrets disappear. They think if they wait long enough or wipe the memory clean enough, the world will forget. But they are wrong, because there is always a detective, a wife, a daughter, or a community that refuses to let the light go out. My. Human beings are strange creatures. They kill for the stupidest reasons you can imagine, and they think they can get away with it. Well, they're wrong. I tell you, murder is an amateur's game, played by people who think they are smart, but they always leave footprints. My. Let us take a walk down to Gilbert, Arizona, Typically, it is a quiet, sun-drenched town, the kind of place where people move to raise their kids in peace. But underneath that serene desert veneer, there's a dark, haunting story. It is the story of Nicholas "Nick" Cordova. He was a devoted father, a 40-year-old business owner who loved his family. On a Wednesday afternoon in May 2020, his life was violently extinguished. 6 years have passed since that afternoon, yet for his wife, Alicia Cordova, the agony of those moments remains as vivid as ever. The nightmare began around 5:30 in the evening. Alicia was in her kitchen when her 5-year-old daughter, Capri, ran in terrified. The kids had been on a video call with Nick, who was at his heating, ventilation, and air conditioning business, Gilbert Air, located at 511 West Guadalupe Road. Suddenly, the kids heard a strange noise, and their father went silent. You have to be kidding me. What a horrific thing for a child to witness. When the police arrived at the office, they saw a man looking through the blinds. That man was Dave Sweetman, Nick's business partner. He came out and handed the officer a bloodied 9mm handgun, claiming it was his, and that 2 men had broken in, attacked him, and fled. Inside, Nick Cordova was dead from a gunshot wound. Now, the investigators started asking questions. Surveillance footage showed 2 masked men entering the building and escaping in a vintage Titone, red and silver Ford F-150. But things did not add up. Dave told the police the intruders forced him to give them all the money in his pocket. But the cops found over $1,000 in cash still on his person. Talk about a bad liar. There had also been serious tension between the partners about company finances. Nick had even told his wife that Dave pressured him to take out mutual life insurance policies, totaling $8 million, and Nick was worried his partner valued him more dead than alive. But the police eventually said they did not consider Dave a suspect in the shooting itself, though the family remained highly skeptical. Today, the case remains active, and there's a reward of $20,000 for information. But wait, it gets even more interesting. Let's look at another tragedy in Gilbert, Arizona, involving the very same last name. In December 2013, a brilliant pediatric neurologist named Laura Sweetman was found dead in her home. She was married to David Sweetman. Coincidence? I do not believe in coincidences. Laura's marriage had been a nightmare, filled with domestic violence, and she had even sought a protective order against David back in April of that year. When she was found dead, the scene raised major red flags. A gate at the bottom of the stairs was displaced, and the back door was unlocked. Yet, the medical examiner, whose career was later ruined by professional misconduct allegations, ruled the cause of death as undetermined. There were conflicting notes about a heart attack, and prescription meds found at the scene were completely missing from her toxicology report. Key leads, like a suspicious vehicle in her driveway weeks before, were ignored. For 13 years, her family has lived with this silence. It makes my blood boil when the system fails a victim like that. Then we go further back, to 1969 in Wisconsin, where we see another kind of evil. An 18-year-old girl named Stephanie Casper was just starting her life. She worked at a restaurant called Mark's Big Boy. On July 9, 1969, a family near the Root River on 8 Mile Road found her dismembered remains wrapped in pages of the Milwaukee Sentinel. The killer had acted with surgical precision. Stephanie had been secretly dating a 22-year-old serviceman named John, keeping it a secret because she feared her parents' reaction. She was last seen leaving her job at 12:30 in the morning, carrying a brown leather purse. Her boyfriend John was supposed to pick her up, but fell asleep. You have to be kidding me. Over the decades, detectives followed endless dead ends, including a manager and a cook named Michael Bartelt. Despite advances in deoxyribonucleic acid, testing old towels and military jackets only gave partial profiles. Other monsters like Wilbert Mackey were investigated but ruled out. For 57 years, that family has waited for justice. And finally, let us look at Taos, New Mexico, in June 2025. Melissa Casillas, an administrative assistant at Los Alamos National Laboratory, dropped her husband Mark off at work and then vanished. Her 18-year-old daughter, Sierra, went to the house and found an eerie scene. Melissa's work phone, her security badge, keys, and her favorite gold chain were on the table. But the real shocker? Her 2 personal cell phones were wiped clean, restored to factory settings hours apart. And the security credentials for her cloud storage were changed. Mark Casillas claimed she ran away because of financial stress, suspended clearances, and mounting debt. But Melissa's family, the Mondragons, suspect foul play. There was a tip about a woman struggling near Highway 518 with a mysterious blue Dodge truck nearby, and later footage showed a woman, matching her description, walking with a backpack. But there has been no bank activity, no passport use, and nothing on her social security number. Was it a voluntary departure, or something much worse? After a year, the family is torn apart, and the silence is deafening. I tell you, whether it's a staged robbery, a botched medical investigation, a decades-old murder, or a sudden disappearance, the truth always leaves a mark. We just have to be willing to look for it. Human beings are strange creatures. They kill for the most ridiculous reasons you can possibly imagine, and sometimes they think they are clever enough to sweep their dirt under the rug and walk away clean. Well, let me tell you something. They are not. I spent 3 decades looking at the worst of humanity, staring into the eyes of people who thought they had committed the perfect crime. And if there is one thing I learned, it is that secrets have a hazardous habit of clawing their way back to the surface. Today, we are looking at stories of lives cut short, families shattered in the long, agonizing walk toward a truth that refuses to stay buried. My, let's start in a quiet, sun-drenched town called Gilbert, Arizona. It is the kind of place people move to when they want peace, but under that serene desert sky, there is a dark, unresolved narrative. On a hot Wednesday afternoon, the 27th of May, 2020, a 40-year-old husband and father named Nicholas Nick Cordova was at his business, Gilbert Air, located at 511 West Guadalupe Road. He was a man who believed in the American dream, a hard worker who took on the responsibility of his family. At around 5:30 in the evening, Nick was on a video call with his young children. Suddenly, they heard a startling noise, and their father went silent. His 5-year-old daughter, Capri, ran to her mother, Alicia, terrified because her daddy was no longer answering. Alicia looked at that screen, and what she witnessed became a lifelong trauma. When the first police officer arrived at the scene, he noticed a man peeking through the office blinds. When ordered to step out, that man identified himself as Dave Sweetman, Nick's business partner. He handed the officer a bloodied 9mm handgun, claiming it belonged to him, and that 2 masked men had entered, attacked them, and fled in a vintage 2-tone red and silver Ford F-150. Inside, they found Nick. He was gone, the victim of a fatal gunshot wound. Now, Dave Sweetman told investigators that the intruder's forcing a hand over all the money in his pockets. But when the officers searched him, they found over $1,000 in cash still on his person. You have to be kidding me. If you are going to lie to a homicide detective, at least try to make it make sense. The family knew there was deep tension between the partners over company finances. In the months before his death, Nick had become paranoid, feeling watched, and he had told Alicia that Dave had pressured him into taking out mutual life insurance policies, totaling $8 million. Nick actually joked that his partner might value him more dead than alive. It turns out that joke was not very funny. The police eventually stated they no longer considered Dave a suspect in the shooting itself. But the family's skepticism remains as sharp as a razor. And when you look at the name Sweetman, the plot thickens. Let's take a step back in time, back to the winter of 2013. In that very same town of Gilbert, Arizona, a brilliant pediatric neurologist named Laura Sweetman was found unresponsive in her home. She was a dedicated doctor, a loving mother, and a woman trapped in an abusive marriage with a man named David Sweetman. Yes, the very same partner from a heating and air company. Earlier that year, Laura had filed for a protection order against him, documenting his erratic, controlling behavior. She told her friends she was being followed, that her life was in danger. On the morning of December 9th, 2013, she was found dead. The scene raised immediate red flags: a displaced gate at the stairs, an unlocked back door. Yet, the medical examiner, whose career would later collapse under allegations of professional misconduct, ruled her cause and manner of death as undetermined. There were medical notes of a past heart attack that left absolutely no physical evidence on her. Heart tissue and prescription medication found at the scene was completely absent from her toxicology reports. A neighbor had reported a suspicious vehicle in her driveway weeks prior, but that lead was left to gather dust. I tell you, when you see a pattern like this, it makes the hair on the back of your neck stand up. It is a tragedy of systemic failure, leaving a family searching for answers for over a decade. But the shadows of human nature are not confined to Arizona. Let us travel north and back in time to the summer of 1969. In Racine County, Wisconsin, Stephanie Casper was on the cusp of her 18th birthday, a kind, hard-working young woman balancing a part-time job at Mark's Big Boy restaurant in Milwaukee. She had a secret romance with a 22-year-old serviceman named John, a relationship she hid from her parents due to the social landscape of the late 1960s. On a drizzly Wednesday afternoon on July 9th, 1969, a family near the Root River by an old condemned steel trestle bridge on 8 Mile Road found what looked like a pile of debris. But it was not debris. It was Stephanie. Her remains had been dismembered post-mortem with methodical, almost surgical precision, wrapped in pages of the Milwaukee Sentinel newspaper from June 24th. Her father, Charles Casper, had identified what was left of his teenage daughter. For 57 years, this case has haunted Wisconsin. Detectives looked at restaurant managers, and they looked at a cook named Michael Bartelt, who gave inconsistent statements about the night. Stephanie disappeared. Decades later, DNA technology brought partial profiles from a towel and a military jacket, but they were too degraded for a match. Suspects like Wilbert Mackey, a man who ran a house of terror for his own children, were scrutinized and excluded, but investigators like Lieutenant Brian Van Sack refused to close the book because the passage of time does not make a murder go away, and the demand for justice never expires. Finally, we look at the high desert landscape of Taos, New Mexico. In June of 2025, an 18-year-old girl named Sierra Casillas got a call from her father, Mark, her mother, Melissa, an administrative assistant at the highly sensitive Los Alamos National Laboratory, had failed to show up for work. They commuted together, but Melissa had claimed she forgot her security badge and drove back home. Sierra saw her mother around 1 o'clock when Melissa dropped off lunch, but after that, there was only a deafening digital silence. When Sierra went to the house, the family Jetta was in the driveway. The dogs were outside and subdued, and inside, Melissa's work phone, keys, badge, and a sentimental gold chain were sitting on the table. Her paycheck was left in the loft. But the most chilling detail was in the office. 2 personal cell phones had been meticulously restored to factory settings, their histories wiped clean, and the cloud security credentials altered. Now, who does that? The disappearance fractured the family into 2 bitter camps. The Casillas household believes Melissa was overwhelmed by financial pressure, garnished wages, and a suspended security clearance, choosing to walk away. A theory seemingly supported by surveillance footage showing a woman matching her description, walking alone with a backpack along Highway 518. But her own family, the Mondragons, suspect foul play, pointing to the wiped phones, the lack of a note, a suspicious blood-like stain near a fish tank, and a tip from an acquaintance who saw a struggling woman near that highway next to a mysterious blue Dodge truck. The New Mexico State Police led by Agent Ezekiel Esquivel-Mata, have searched the rugged terrain with drones and dogs, but the land is keeping its secrets. Whether Melissa chose to vanish into the thin air to escape her debts, or whether she met a darker fate, the tragedy remains the same: a daughter left in limbo, and a family torn apart by suspicion. Connuoi indeed are complicated, and the answers we seek are often buried deep in the silence of those who know, but refuse to speak. Human beings are strange creatures. They kill for the most ridiculous reasons you could ever imagine. Sometimes it is for money, sometimes it is for love, and sometimes it is just because they can. In my 23 years as a homicide detective, I have seen the absolute worst of what humanity has to offer. People think they can commit the perfect crime. They think they are smart. But I have a news flash for you. They are not. They always leave a trail. They always make a mistake. And when they do, guys like me are waiting to catch them. My. Let's start in Gilbert, Arizona. It is a nice place. Sun-drenched desert landscapes, quiet residential communities, and the tight-knit spirit of a growing town. But under that nice veneer, a dark and unresolved evil found a way in. It was a Wednesday in May 2020. The victim was a 40-year-old father and business owner named Nicholas Nick Cordova. He was a dedicated man who built a heating, ventilation, and air conditioning company known as Gilbert Air. It was meant to be his American dream. But on May 27th, 2020, around 5:30 in the evening, that dream ended in a nightmare. His wife, Alicia, was in her kitchen when her 5-year-old daughter Capri rushed in with terrifying news. The children had been on a video call with their father, who was working late at his office. Suddenly, the children heard a startling noise, and then their father stopped speaking. What Alicia saw and heard through that screen is the kind of trauma that never goes away. When the police were called to the office building at 511 West Guadalupe Road, they did not find a professional hit. They found a mess. The first officer on the scene noticed a man peeking through the office blinds. That is your first clue that something is wrong. People who have just survived a home invasion or an armed robbery do not peek through the blinds, like they are hiding. When ordered to step outside, this man emerged. He identified himself as Dave Sweetman, Nick's business partner. He handed the officer a bloodied 9mm handgun and claimed it belonged to him. He told a story about 2 masked men entering the building, attacking them, and fleeing in a vintage 2-tone red and silver Ford F-150. Inside, they found Nick. He was unresponsive, killed by a single gunshot wound. Now, let's analyze the story. Dave tells investigators that these mysterious masked intruders forced him a hand over the money in his pocket. Yet, when the officers search Dave, they find over $1,000 in cash still on his person. You have to be kidding me. If someone is robbing you at gunpoint, they do not leave $1,000 in your pocket out of the goodness of their hearts. And then we have the business relationship. The partnership had soured. Nick had become paranoid, telling his wife that he felt watched and that Dave was making questionable financial moves. But here is the kicker. Dave had pressured Nick into taking out mutual life insurance policies totaling $8 million. Nick had even told his wife that he was worried his partner valued him more dead than alive. I tell you, when your business partner suggests an $8 million policy on your life, you might want to start looking over your shoulder. The police eventually stated they no longer considered Dave a suspect in the shooting itself. But the family remains deeply skeptical, and they have every right to be. But in my line of work, we do not believe in coincidences. We believe in patterns. If you think the name Sweetman in Gilbert, Arizona, is just a random occurrence, let us wind the clock back to December of 2013. A brilliant pediatric neurologist named Laura Sweetman was found unresponsive in her home. She was a cherished member of the medical community, a mother of 3 sons, and a woman living in terror. Earlier that year, she had filed an order of protection against her husband, David Sweetman. She documented his erratic behavior and his attempts to hold her against her will. She told her friend she was being followed, that her safety was in jeopardy. On the morning of December 9th, 2013, her life was cut short. The scene at her home raised immediate red flags. A safety gate at the base of the staircase was displaced, and the back door was unlocked. Yet, the investigation seemed to stumble right out of the gate. The autopsy was performed by a medical examiner whose career would later be ruined by allegations of professional misconduct. He ruled the cause of death as undetermined. There was superficial trauma, but no clear link. There were conflicting medical notes about a past heart attack that left no actual physical damage. To her heart, there was prescription medication at the scene, but her toxicology report showed absolutely zero trace of it in her system. Key leads, like a neighbor reporting a suspicious vehicle in her driveway weeks prior, were never properly pursued. Her social circle, including men she had been dating, was barely looked into. It has been 13 years, and her family is still left in the dark. The system failed her, and it makes my blood boil. Tragedy and unresolved questions do not just belong to the Arizona desert. Sometimes the ghosts of the past wait decades in the cold northern air of Racine County, Wisconsin. Let's go back to July of 1969. It was a gray, drizzly Wednesday afternoon. A local family went down to the Root River near an old condemned steel trestle bridge on 8 Mile Road. They expected to have a quiet day of fishing. Instead, they found a pile of debris near the water that turned out to be the remains of an 18-year-old girl named Stephanie Casper. Stephanie was a bright, hard-working young girl who had recently graduated high school. She was balancing a part-time job at a Milwaukee restaurant called Mark's Big Boy and navigating a secret relationship with a 22-year-old serviceman named John. When investigators processed a riverbank, they realized they were dealing with a monster. Parts of Stephanie's body were wrapped in pages of the Milwaukee Sentinel newspaper dated June 24th and scattered. The dismemberment had occurred after she died, performed with methodical, almost surgical precision. This tells me the killer had time, a secluded space, and some form of technical skill. Her father, Charles Casper, identified her just as he was about to report her missing. The timeline of her disappearance was paper-thin. She was last seen at 12:30 in the morning on a Sunday, walking out of the restaurant with her brown leather purse. Her boyfriend, John, was supposed to pick her up, but he fell asleep. A simple, human mistake that left a young girl completely vulnerable to the darkness of the night. Later, personal items like her gold clutch, an appointment book, and photographs were found discarded in the city of Franklin, indicating the killer was moving along the rural back roads between Milwaukee and Racine. Weeks later, more of her remains were found in a cardboard box near a farmhouse. Over the next 57 years, the case became a graveyard of leads. Detectives looked at the restaurant manager and a cook named Michael Bartelt, who gave inconsistent stories. Decades passed until 1988, when a family member made allegations against Bartelt, but the forensic technology of the era could not bridge the gap. Even as DNA science evolved, the evidence, including hairs on a towel and a military jacket, was too degraded. Suspects like the Bartelt brothers and a convicted offender named Wilbert Mackey were investigated and ruled out. Investigators like Lieutenant Brian Van Sack have kept the search alive, refused to let her name be forgotten, because a family's love and the demand for justice do not have an expiration date. Then we have New Mexico, the land of enchantment. But on June 26, 2025, in Taos, that enchantment vanished. An 18-year-old girl named Sierra Casillas was working at a coffee shop when she received a phone call from her father, Mark. His voice was filled with a tension that makes your stomach drop. Her mother, Melissa Casillas, who worked as an administrative assistant at the highly secure Los Alamos National Laboratory, had failed to report for her shift. Mark and Melissa commuted together every day, sharing a single vehicle. But that morning, Melissa had driven back home alone, claiming she forgot her security badge and might work remotely. Sierra had seen her mother at 1 o'clock in the afternoon when Melissa dropped off lunch at the coffee shop, but after that, there was only silence. When Sierra tried to message her, the text bubble stayed green. The location app showed nothing. Sierra drove to their home and found the family Jetta in the driveway. The dogs were outside, quiet and subdued. Inside the house, Melissa's work phone, her badge, her keys, and her favorite gold chain were sitting on the kitchen table. Her paycheck was still in the loft. But the most disturbing discovery was in the office. Sierra found 2 of her mother's personal cell phones. Both had been restored to factory settings. Their histories wiped completely clean hours apart from each other. You have to be kidding me. People do not factory reset their phones, let alone 2 of them at separate times. Before they go missing, that takes intent. That takes time. The investigation, led by State Police Agent Ezekiel Esquivel Mata, quickly ran into a wall of family. Division, Mark Casillas, a skill hunter and outfitter, believed his wife ran away, overwhelmed by financial pressures, garnished wages, and suspended security clearances. He even dismissed a tip from an acquaintance named Lloyd about a woman matching Melissa's. Description struggling near Highway 518 near a mysterious blue Dodge truck. On the other side, Melissa's family, the Mondragons, believed foul play was involved, pointing to the reset phones and the tension in the marriage. When surveillance footage from July showed a woman resembling Melissa walking alone with a backpack along that same highway, the voluntary departure theory gained traction. But a clean break in the modern digital age is nearly impossible. There has been no banking activity, no passport applications, and no activity on her social security number. Drones, helicopters, and search dogs have found nothing. A blood-like stain found near a fish tank in the home remains a point of bitter contention. Whether Melissa walked away to escape her life, or whether someone made sure she could never return. The result is the same, a family fractured by suspicion, and a daughter left waiting for answers. My, in all of these cases, from the Arizona desert to the Wisconsin riverbanks and the mountains of New Mexico, we see the same tragic human elements. We see greed, betrayal, system failures, and a devastating silence that follows when a life is abruptly interrupted. But we also see the resilience of the loved ones left behind, who refuse to let the truth remain buried. The badge I wore for decades taught me one thing above all else. The truth has a voice. And as long as there is someone willing to listen, the search for justice never truly ends. Human beings are strange creatures. They kill each other for the most ridiculous reasons you can possibly imagine. In my 38 years of looking at dead bodies, I saw it all. Greed, jealousy, anger, or just pure, unadulterated stupidity. Usually, it is a combination of all of them. People think they can hide behind the quiet veneer of a nice, sun-drenched suburban neighborhood. They think a manicured lawn and a friendly smile can wash away the darkness. Well, guess what? It does not work that way. Crime does not care about your zip code. It follows the same ugly patterns, from the high desert of Arizona to the cold rivers of Wisconsin, and all the way to the isolated mountains of New Mexico. Let's start in a place called Gilbert, Arizona. It is a quiet town, the kind of place where people go to raise families and escape the noise of the big city. But on May 27, 2020, that peaceful illusion came crashing down. It was about 5:30 in the evening. A normal Wednesday for most, but not for the Cordova family. Alicia Cordova was in her kitchen when her 5-year-old daughter, Capri, ran in terrified. The children had been on a video call with their father, 40-year-old Nicholas Nick Cordova. Nick was at his business, an air conditioning company called Gilbert Air. Suddenly, the kids heard a strange noise and then absolute silence. Their father stopped responding. Think about that for a second. Your children are looking at you through a screen, and in a split second, you are gone. The police are called to the office at 511 West Guadalupe Road. The first officer on the scene walks up to the building and notices a man peeking through the window. Blinds. He orders him to step outside. The man complies. He hands the officer a bloodied 9mm handgun and says it belongs to him. This man is Dave Sweetman, Nick's business partner. Dave tells the officer that 2 men entered the building, attacked them, and fled into the night. Inside the office, the officers find Nick Cordova. He is unresponsive, suffering from a fatal gunshot wound. He is dead. Now, when you hear a story like that, your investigator brain starts to click. You look for the logic. But in this case, the logic was hard to find. The surveillance footage shows 2 masked individuals entering the building, and they escape in a vintage 2-tone red and silver Ford F-150. But then you look at Dave Sweetman's story. Dave tells the investigators that the intruders force him a hand over all the cash in his pockets. But when the officers search Dave, they find more than $1,000 in cash still on his person. You have to be kidding me. If you are going to lie to a homicide detective, at least make sure your pockets are empty. It gets worse. There was massive tension between these 2 partners over the company finances. And then we find out about the life insurance policies. They had mutual policies worth $8 million. Before he died, Nick was becoming paranoid. He told his wife he felt watched, and he openly worried that his partner valued him more dead than alive. Despite these glaring red flags, the police eventually declared they did not consider Dave a suspect in the shooting itself, though they remained skeptical. 6 years have passed, and Alicia Cordova is still fighting for the truth. The reward is up to $20,000, but the silence from the department is deafening. But wait, the story of the Sweetman family does not begin or end in 2020. To understand the present, sometimes you have to look at the past. And the past in this town is very dark. Let us go back 13 years before Nick Cordova's death, to the winter of 2013. On the morning of December 9th, 2013, a woman named Laura Sweetman was found unresponsive in her Gilbert home. Laura was a brilliant pediatric neurologist at the Phoenix Children's Hospital. She saved children for a living, but she could not save herself from a tumultuous marriage. And guess who her husband was? David Sweetman. Yes, the very same Dave Sweetman from the Gilbert Air homicide. Laura's life behind closed doors was a nightmare. In April of that year, she filed for protection order against David. She documented his erratic behavior and his attempts to hold her against her will. She told her close friends she was terrified, that she was being followed, and that her safety was constantly threatened. When she was found dead, the scene raised immediate questions. A security gate at the bottom of the stairs was knocked out of place. The back door was unlocked. But then we get to the medical examiner's report, and this is where my blood starts to boil. The autopsy was performed by an examiner whose career was later destroyed by accusations of serious professional misconduct. This examiner ruled the cause and manner of death as undetermined. There was physical trauma on her body, but the report ignored its significance. The notes claimed she had a previous heart attack, yet there was no physical damage to her heart tissue. Prescription drugs were found at the scene, but they were completely absent from her toxicology report. I tell you, a child could see the inconsistencies here. Yet, the police ruled the case inactive after just a few months. They ignored a neighbor's report of a suspicious vehicle parked in her driveway weeks before she died. They failed to dig into her social circle. They chose the easy way out, leaving a family to grieve in silence for over a decade. It makes you wonder about the systems we trust to protect us. When those systems fail, the truth gets buried under piles of redacted paperwork and bureaucratic indifference. But the truth has a funny way of trying to claw its way back to the light, even if it takes 57 years. Let us travel across the country to Racine County, Wisconsin. The year is 1969. It was a Wednesday afternoon, July 9th. The sky was overcast, and a light drizzle was falling. A local family was walking near an old, condemned steel trestle bridge on 8 Mile Road. near the Root River. They spotted what looked like a pile of trash near the water, but it was not trash. It was the dismembered remains of a young girl. Her name was Stephanie Casper. She was almost 18 years old. She was a recent high school graduate, a hard-working kid who held down a job at Mark's Big Boy restaurant in downtown Milwaukee. Her father, Charles Casper, had to perform the grim task of identifying his daughter's remains. The killer in this case was not just cruel. He was cold and methodical. The medical examiner determined that the dismemberment occurred after she died, performed with a terrifying, almost surgical precision. Portions of her body were wrapped in pages of the Milwaukee Sentinel newspaper from June 24th and left on the riverbank. As detectives investigated, they found that Stephanie was a sweet girl, but like many teenagers, she had secrets. She was dating a 22-year-old serviceman named John. Because of the social climate of the late 1960s, she kept the relationship a secret from her parents. On the night she disappeared, Sunday, July 6th, she walked out of the restaurant at 12:30 in the morning carrying her brown purse. John was supposed to pick her up, but he fell asleep. A young man closed his eyes, and a young girl walked into a nightmare. The investigation went in circles for decades. They found some of her belongings discarded in Franklin, suggesting the killer knew the rural back roads. They looked at the restaurant staff. They looked at a manager who seemed too eager to help, and a cook named Michael Bartelt who kept changing his story. In 1988, a relative pointed the finger at Bartelt again, but the forensic science of the era was not advanced enough to secure a conviction. DNA testing on pubic hairs found on a towel and a military jacket yielded degraded profiles. Suspects like Wilbert Mackey, a violent offender, were eventually ruled out. 57 years later, the Racine County Sheriff's Office is still looking for the monster who tore a family apart. They refuse to let Stephanie be forgotten, and they are right. You never stop looking. Because when you stop looking, the monsters win. And sometimes, the mystery is not just about a body left by a river, but about a person who simply vanishes into the thin desert air, leaving behind a trail of digital silence. Let us go to Taos, New Mexico. The date is Thursday, June 26, 2025. Sierra Casillas is 18 years old, working her shift at a local coffee shop. Her father, Mark, calls her. His voice is tight. Her mother, Melissa, did not show up for a shift at the Los Alamos National Laboratory. Mark and Melissa commute together every day because they share a car. But Sierra knows something her father does not. Melissa had driven back home after dropping Mark off, claiming she forgot her security badge and might work remotely. Sierra had actually seen her mother around 1 o'clock that afternoon when Melissa dropped off lunch. At the coffee shop, when Sierra tries to text her mother, the messages do not go through. The location-sharing app is dead. Sierra leaves work and drives home. The family's white Jetta is parked in the driveway. The dogs are outside, quiet and subdued. Inside the house, everything seems normal, except for the things left behind. Melissa's work phone, her security badge, her keys, and her favorite gold chain are sitting on the kitchen table. Her paycheck is sitting in the loft, unclaimed. And then Sierra walks into the office. She finds 2 personal cell phones. Both have been wiped clean, restored to factory settings. The cloud passwords have been changed. The heart of the home is gone, and the digital footprint has been erased. Agent Ezekiel Esquivel Mata of the New Mexico State Police takes the case. Instantly, the family splits into 2 camps, creating 2 entirely different narratives. Mark, the husband, is a hunter and an outfitter. He suggests that Melissa was overwhelmed by financial pressure. They had garnished wages, suspended security clearances, and their daughter's upcoming college expenses. He thinks she chose to walk away and start a new life. But Melissa's family, the Mondragons, do not buy it. They say Melissa would never abandon her daughter. They look at those wiped phones, the lack of a note, and the tension in the marriage, and they smell foul play. The leads are messy. A family acquaintance named Lloyd says he saw a woman matching Melissa's description near highway. 518, struggling, with mysterious blue Dodge truck nearby. Mark quickly dismisses his tip, pointing out details that did not match. Later, a surveillance video from July shows a woman with a backpack walking down that same highway, fueling the theory that she left voluntarily. But let's use some logic here. If you are going to disappear on purpose, do you meticulously perform 2 separate factory resets on your phones hours apart? Or does someone else do that to hide their own tracks? And what about the blood-like stain found near the fish tank in the home? The state police have no body, no banking activity, and no passport usage. Just a massive, empty void where a woman used to be. You see, in my line of work, you learn that secrets are heavy things. They weigh people down until they break. Whether it is a business partner with a bloodied gun, a husband with a dark history, a shadow on a riverbank, or a factory reset phone on a kitchen table, the truth is always there, waiting. It does not matter how many years pass. The families of Nick Cordova, Laura Sweetman, Stephanie Casper, and Melissa Casillas are still waiting. And I tell you, they deserve to know, because justice is not a luxury. It is a necessity. Human beings are strange creatures. They kill for the most ridiculous reasons you can possibly imagine. Sometimes it is for a handful of dollars. Sometimes it is for a piece of paper called an insurance policy. And sometimes they do it just because they think they are the smartest person in the room. But let me tell you something. They are not. I have spent my entire life staring into the eyes of monsters. And if there's one thing I know, it is that greed and malice always leave a trail. You might think you got away with it, but the truth has a funny way of clawing its way back to the surface. Let us take a trip to Arizona, a place called Gilbert, sun-drenched, quiet, the kind of suburban paradise where people go to raise their kids and escape the chaos of the world. But paradise is an illusion. On the 27th of May, in the year 2020, that illusion shattered. Nicholas Nick Cordova was a 40-year-old father, a hard-working man who built a life with his hands. He was a partner in a heating, ventilation, and air conditioning business called Gilbert Air. He had a wife, Alicia, and a 5-year-old daughter named Capri. On a typical Wednesday evening, around 5:30, Capri was on a video call with her daddy. He was at the office. Just a normal chat between a father and his little girl. Suddenly, there is a strange noise. Then nothing. The screen goes quiet. Imagine being a mother, seeing your child hold a silent phone, knowing in your gut that something terrible has just happened. I tell you, that is the kind of nightmare that never leaves your soul. The police arrive at 511 West Guadalupe Road. The first officer on the scene looks up and sees a man peeking through the office blinds. My, if 2 armed intruders just ran into your building and killed your business partner, you do not stand at the window playing peek-boo with the responding officers. You run for your life. But this man, Dave Sweetman, Nick's business partner, walks out and hands the officer a bloodied 9mm handgun. He says it is his. He claims 2 masked men burst in, attacked them, robbed them, and fled. But inside, Nick Cordova is lying dead from a gunshot wound. Now, let us look at the logic here. Dave Sweetman tells the investigators that the robbers forced him to give them all the money from his pockets, but when the officers search him, they find over $1,000 in cash still sitting in his pockets. You have to be kidding me. A robber who kills a man, but decides to leave $1,000 in the partner's pocket? That does not happen in the real world. And then you look deeper. Nick and Dave had a 50-50 stake in that business. But the partnership had turned sour. Nick was getting paranoid. He felt like he was being watched. He told his wife that Dave was making questionable financial moves and had pressured him into taking out mutual life insurance policies. The value? $8 million. My, that is a lot of money. It makes you wonder if a partner is worth more to you dead than alive. The police eventually claimed they did not consider Dave a suspect in the physical shooting, but the family still looks at him with deep skepticism. And I do too, because money does not just talk in these cases, it screams. But this story gets even colder, because Dave Sweetman is not the only person in his family associated with a mysterious, unresolved death in Gilbert, Arizona. Let us turn the clock back to the winter of 2013. December 9th, to be exact. Laura Sweetman was a brilliant pediatric neurologist, a mother of 3 sons, a woman who dedicated her life to saving children, but her personal life was a battlefield. She was married to David Sweetman. In April of that same year, she had to get an order of protection against him. She documented his erratic behavior, his attempts to hold her against her will. She was terrified. She told her friends she was being followed. Then, on that December morning, she is found dead in her home. The scene is highly unusual. A safety gate at the bottom of the stairs is displaced. The back door is unlocked, but the medical examiner rules the cause and manner of death as undetermined. My. The autopsy report notes physical trauma, but does not connect it to her death. There are notes about a heart attack, but no actual damage to her heart tissue. There are prescription pills at the scene, but none of it shows up in her toxicology report. And to make matters worse, that medical examiner was later hit with serious allegations of professional misconduct. The police let the case go inactive after just a few months. A neighbor reported seeing a highly suspicious vehicle in her driveway weeks before, but nobody followed up. I tell you, when the system fails a victim like Laura, it makes my blood boil. For 13 years, her family has lived in the quiet agony of the unknown, holding on to color instead of mourning, waiting for someone to finally look at the facts with open eyes. It seems some puzzles are left to gather dust, but the dead do not sleep quietly. They demand answers. Let's go north. Wisconsin, 1969. Stephanie Casper was a bright 18-year-old girl on the cusp of womanhood. She had just graduated high school. She was working part-time at a restaurant called Mark's Big Boy. It was a drizzly, overcast Wednesday on the 9th of July when a local family took a walk near an old, condemned steel bridge on 8 Mile Road by the Root River. They saw what they thought was debris. It was not debris. It was the dismembered remains of Stephanie Casper. The killer had handled her body with chilling, almost surgical precision. Parts of her were wrapped in pages of the Milwaukee Sentinel newspaper from 2 weeks prior. Her father, Charles, had to identify his own daughter. Can you imagine the weight of that? The detectives started digging. Stephanie had a secret. She was dating a 22-year-old serviceman named John. In 1969, a teenager dating an older man was something you kept hidden from your parents. On the night she disappeared, she walked out of the restaurant at 12:30 in the morning, carrying her brown leather purse. John was supposed to pick her up, but he fell asleep. You have to be kidding me. Your teenage girlfriend is walking home alone in the middle of the night, and you just drift off to sleep? For decades, the case was a graveyard of broken leads. Discarded items were found in Franklin. A restaurant cook named Michael Bartelt gave conflicting stories. Years later, in 1988, allegations rose against Bartelt, but the forensic technology of the era could not bridge the gap. Even when modern deoxyribonucleic acid testing became available, the samples were too degraded. Suspects like Wilbert Mackey, a man who terrified his own family, were looked at and excluded. 57 years have passed. The family still waits. The detectives still look. Because a young girl's life was stolen, and the monster who did it might have carried that secret to his grave. And finally, we look at the high deserts of New Mexico, Taos County, 2025. On the 26th of June, an 18-year-old girl named Sierra Casillas is working at a coffee shop. Her father, Mark, calls her. His voice is shaking. Her mother, Melissa, did not show up for her shift as an administrative assistant at the Los Alamos National Laboratory. Mark and Melissa commute together every day because they share a car. But Melissa had supposedly gone back home because she forgot her security badge. Sierra had seen her mother around 1 o'clock when Melissa dropped off lunch. But after that, nothing. Digital silence. Sierra goes to the house. The car is in the driveway. The dogs are outside, completely quiet. Inside, Melissa's work phone, her security badge, her keys, and her favorite gold chain are sitting on the kitchen table. Her paycheck is sitting in the loft. But here is the real kicker. In the office, Sierra finds her mother's 2 personal cell phones. Both of them have been completely restored to their factory settings. Their histories wiped clean. The cloud security credentials had been changed. My. People do not just factory reset 2 phones and leave their keys and sentimental jewelry on the table before going for a casual walk. The investigation splits into 2 bitter camps. Mark Casillas and his household claim Melissa ran away. They point to financial pressures, garnished wages, and suspended security clearances. They say she chose to vanish. But Melissa's own family, the Mondragons, say absolutely not. She would never leave her daughter without a word. They see the wiped phones, the lack of a note, and the tension in the marriage, and they see foul play. There's a tip about a woman struggling near Highway 518 with a blue Dodge truck. Nearby, Mark immediately dismisses the tip because the woman did not have a limp. Why would you dismiss a lead so quickly when your wife is missing? Later, surveillance video shows a woman with a backpack walking along that same highway. The state police find a blood-like stain near a fish tank inside the home, but they cannot prove anything. Melissa Casillas has vanished into the thin air of New Mexico, leaving behind a fractured family, each holding their own version of the truth. I tell you, whether it is a partner with an $8 million insurance policy, a husband with an order of protection against him, a boyfriend who fell asleep, or a wiped phone on a kitchen table, the truth is always there. It is hidden behind the lies people tell themselves and the silence they keep. But as long as there is breath in our lungs, we keep looking, because the victims deserve nothing less than the absolute truth. People are strange creatures. I tell you, they kill for the most ridiculous reasons you could ever imagine. Sometimes it is greed, sometimes it is a marriage turned sour, and sometimes it is a dark, methodical sickness that resides in the deepest corners of a